Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the. Thank God for editing. Let me try that again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Curbside Podcast. I am your host, Jay Kirby. Here tonight, continuing our latest series, as I have officially dubbed it, Meeting the Menagerie. We are sitting down with Joe, aka Owynn Swartzchild. Joe, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Like I said during the interview with Taruk, diving into the cast, players, and characters of Dice Hard with a Vengeance, all leading up to the big Dice Hard After Dark live special, which I don't know when that'll be, but hopefully soon. But as always, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, tap the little bell on your YouTube app so you never miss an upload, and buy the shirts at prowrestlingtees.com. And shout out to our sponsors, repsports.com and jerky.pro. Use the promo code curbside8 at checkout. So Joe, we talked a little bit about before we got started. You have an interesting history with the show. You came on as backup Belden when Christian had we'll call them professional obligations outside of the show, and wasn't able to make it for the big Rakshasa fight round 1. So you filled in, did a good job, and then later on when we were a little low on cast members just because of scheduling or more conflict with people being available, you stepped in as Owynn. And not that you didn't do a great job playing on, but definitely ruffled feathers in the party. And it was interesting to see because we hadn't had someone like that in the party just yet. So it was very interesting to see you come in, kind of throw a wrench into everything, and made for some entertaining sessions. So, but where did I'll start with this because I've asked it in the last 2 D&D based interviews. Where did your love of D&D start? Where did the passion for the great tabletop game begin?
Well, a few years back, so it's been about 5 years ago, me, my fiance, my best friend, and one of his best friends, basically his sister, and her boyfriend at the time, moved in together. And the boyfriend at the time, he was a very nice guy. He was into Pathfinder. So we started playing. My best friend, he was an experienced tabletop player. He had played Rifts, Palladium Rifts, which if any of you don't know what that is, it's D&D on the highest possible difficulty. 2 hours making a character, dead in 5 minutes. Spend another 2 hours making a character.
That just hurts.
It would if it were not for the fact that the disparity of characters that you can make in Palladium Rifts, especially today, is so ludicrously broad. I could be a Gundam pilot, a Jedi, a potato with psionic powers. I could be a drug-addicted Hulk knockoff. I could just be a cactus. There are entire blocks for all of these things. I'm only exaggerating like that much because the actual cactus is a cactus person, not just a cactus.
Right.
But so I was introduced to tabletop games at that point.
Okay.
Me having hyperfixation and having a need for a creative outlet, spent a lot of time just building characters, theory crafting in a builder that I had paid for, And it was a lot of fun just thinking about these characters, how they could work mechanically, trying to build characters that I had seen from other media. How most of us, at least, begin when we're in our nascent stages of tabletop RPG, specifically D&D play. Oh, I want to be Superman. I want to be a Jedi. I want to be a knight in shining armor. I want to be a wizard. I want to be a hyper specific character from a show that was canceled halfway through its first season in 2004. I want to be right. I want to be the core of D&D for me as a player, which I don't get to do as often as I'd like, but specifically as a DM, is I want to be. That is what D&D is. That is what a tabletop RPG is and should be, in my opinion. When somebody comes to the table and says, I want to be who I wish I was. I want to be a woman who is accepted by her peers and is brilliant and is beautiful and has talent and is able to help other people. I want to be a man who is strong and tall and broad-shouldered and square-jawed that can stand in front of any problem and protect the people at his back. I want to be a person who is comfortable with who they are and lives their life the way that they have decided that they should live their life and are free from any pressures or derision or cruelty or unfairness that real life has given so many of us in many ways. I want to be. D&D is a space and a rule set and a kit with predefined parameters to make it easy to figure out what we're going to do next, where when somebody says, I want to be, you can say, okay, roll initiative. That's just how it is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people haven't gotten to see some of the other characters that I've played in D&D. Everyone has mostly just seen Tauren, but I've talked in interviews about playing Quincy, the gnome artificer. Always wanted to be smarter. Quincy is the smartest person in the room, sometimes to his detriment, but that's a story for another time. More recently, you've seen it in our offline game, Bjorn, the Dragonborn Bard. I've always wanted to be the charismatic, not a care in the world, smooth talker when I have anxiety and don't get to do that in real life. I've tried to put that science to the test. It doesn't always work, but he can be that character, and it's so much easier to just jump into that character than it would seem sometimes.
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. Especially when you're making a character where you know there's an aspect of them that is what you wish you could be. And this is, I'll use an analogy that I learned from Brennan Lee Mulligan of Dimension 20. And most recently, the Exandria Calamity. Every character you make is a stained glass window. When he said that, I was very interested, and I thought about it. When you make a character that is fundamentally something you wish you were, it's because you think that what that character is an accurate representation of what you think that thing is. Quincy, for you, is a very intelligent person who always has an intellectual fix for a problem, an educated opinion, and a potential solution to any problem that could be given to you. Because that's what you think being smart is like. Well, Not being smart, but rather specifically being smarter than you see yourself to be.
Right.
When crafting a character with that mindset, the beautiful part of D&D is the cooperative storytelling. So when you build a character that is your idea of smarter than you, and it butts up against other characters that are as smart as you and players that are smarter than you, those moments of friction inform whether or not your worldview and the slice of your lens that looks at what being smarter than you is and puts it to the test as to whether or not that's true. Being smart is not necessarily having a solution. It's just knowing that there can be a solution or being able to evaluate potential solutions. Coming up with a solution is creativity, not intelligence. Intelligence gives you a wider breadth of subjects from which you can cite a solution. Creativity, intuition, and intent. These things, traditionally wisdom scores, are what give you potential solutions. Wisdom gives you a list of solutions. Intelligence marks off the ones that won't work for reasons. And that's something that a lot of smart people never get because they don't have the charisma to get people to be around them long enough to teach them. And that's the trick. The trick about a good D&D character, a good character in writing of any kind, is to know what is the lie they tell themselves and what aspect of who I want them to be is me, and what aspects are what I think it would be like to be that. You know, to segue into Owynn, the parts of Owynn that are me are you're doing something stupid and dangerous. You shouldn't do that. But the parts of Owynn that are, or at least were beyond me, were the cruel altruism that he was, the willingness to throw himself on a sword under somebody else's name because he knew that you never pity a martyr because they love their job. But he had accepted a truth. Altruism doesn't exist. But if you try to be altruistic, that's good enough. Because if you sacrifice something to help others, to provide for others, to do good for others, doesn't that make you feel like you did the right thing? Is that not enjoyable?
Yeah.
So then you did gain something. You gained enjoyment and happiness from what you did. So what you did could not have been altruistic by definition. It's a paradox, it's a logical paradox. And only by seeing that and understanding, I am a bad person for doing X, but if I do X, the results are good for everyone. It's a justification if you're right. It's rationalization if you're wrong. And that's the risk. That's always the risk.
And you and I have discussed that offline before, the difference with Owynn and Tauren, because Tauren will do the right thing because it's the right thing. Owynn will do the right thing because it's the only option, or because he sees the not so much that it's the only option, but less, hey, we should help these people because they're in need, or which is exactly what Tauren would do, regardless of how much trouble it's going to get him. Owyn's gonna go, they could use our help, but at what cost to us?
Well, I think that was part of the portrayal of Owynn in order to maintain the implicit shadiness of the character.
Right.
I would argue that fundamentally, in retrospect, having analyzed the character, the difference between Torrin and Owynn is Torrin will run headlong into a fight because he knows that doing so is the right thing. It's the good thing. It's the morally correct action.
Mm-hmm.
I'm being a hero. I'm saving these people that need to be saved. Owynn looks at results. What will maximize the good or the happiness in the world? What will minimize the bad in the world? Whatever that answer is what he does.
Right.
Owynn is what's called an act utilitarian. Torrin is a moral relativist. To put it in simple terms, Torrin is an empathetic, sympathetic person who knows that this would be bad if it happened to me, so it's bad if it happens to somebody else, and I don't want bad things to happen to people, so I'm going to stop it, and I have the power to do so.
Right.
Owynn says, hitting this button on this black box will save more lives than not hitting this button on the black box. So he hits the button. He doesn't care what's inside the box. It doesn't matter to him what he has to do to get that outcome. Because if that outcome is accurate, it makes the world a better place, then it's worth it.
Right.
No matter what it is.
And I think that's where the characters really started butting heads.
Mm-hmm.
Is Owynn going, weighing the risks to the quote unquote the rewards, whereas Torrin is gonna look at, yeah, but what about all this risk? You're just gonna, what was it? I want to say I think someone used it was Taliesin. Taliesin, when he's talking about Percy, how he created Percy. And it was Percy would do he would do the wrong thing for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And he would sacrifice 1,000 to save 1,000,000.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Torrin, and I believe Owynn would, think similar. Whereas Torrin goes, yeah, but what about that 1,000? Is there any way that 1,000 doesn't have to be a thing? And that's where the characters butted heads.
Yeah, you can reduce that maybe, but if you can't, you still do it. That's the difference. Torrin's strength comes from, in my opinion at least, the fact that he'll do what's right no matter the cost. And for Owynn is he'll do what nets the most right, no matter the cost. Because those two are not the same thing.
Right. No, definitely not the same thing.
Like, for example, I think a good example of it was when Owynn was disguised as just the random wood elf sailor.
Mm.
He solved a problem, made some money, took out a bad person, because all three of those things net a good for him.
Mm-hmm.
And for the party. So he did it. And when Torrin put himself in a position where it was increasing the potential cost, that fundamentally goes against Owynn's personal philosophy and how he does things,
Right.
which puts his life in danger, puts the life of the people in the party in danger, but at that time, more importantly, put Hector's life in danger. That is why Owynn was so hard on Torrin in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have an opinion on what's going on, that's fine. But if that opinion is going to contain information that will hurt other people, keep it to yourself.
Right.
And if you're not smart enough to know how to keep your mouth shut, it can be shut for you.
Mm-hmm.
That was Owynn's mentality.
Right.
Because he wasn't angry, but you're playing with matches in a room full of explosives.
Right.
And if I need to take your hand so you don't do it again, then that's what I'm going to do.
Right.
I don't care how far I have to go, but that's what we'll do. And that's the part of me that shines through in Owynn, is the idea that if this is what's good, if this is the happy ending for the world, then it doesn't matter how you get there.
Right.
It doesn't. And which is why it was so much fun to play off against V, not a people, and Torrin, the little boy the little golden retriever who knew he could do. You know?
So, seeing, you and I can get along just fine. Owynn and Torrin did not get along for reasons already stated. What was do you mind if I divulge a little bit of your personal information to the podcast?
I mean,
for those of you who don't already know,
nothing incriminating, I hope.
No, I mean, the fact that you and Olive, aka Lady V, are married.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for the two of you to have these two characters so opposed to one another at all damn times? Everything, like, watching it was beautiful. Watching it, sitting back and just letting you two try to out petty one another, out passive aggressive one another was a thing of beauty. What was it like for you two as players, especially as a married couple?
It was supremely entertaining because of the patatextual conversation that was going on. In character, Owynn and V butted heads for a lot of reasons. At a meta-narrative level, there were very specific reasons why Owynn was setting himself up to be adversarial to V in the way that he did. There's a reason why he manipulated Hector into the position he did. There's a reason why he manipulated the party the way that he did. But the way that he spoke, the relaxed, sure of himself, I'm right, and you can agree with me or not, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm right. Candor is something that she can read into so beautifully well. She was responding to arguments that were not being made with the subtlest of snide remarks and body language. And V hated Owynn because Owynn didn't care about anybody's opinion,
right,
except for Hector's. And that was the one thing she really wanted at the time. So one thing she prized and loved at the time. So she picked one egg out of the entire Easter egg hunt to be her egg. And then Owynn showed up and is
that one.
And Owynn shows up and is like, I'm gonna poke your egg. I'm gonna poke your egg. And it just set her off. It was amazing.
It was.
The passive aggressiveness was simply because Owynn knowing who V was gave him a footing that no other character had until Owynn showed up. Which is Yeah, he knows exactly who you are and what you do. And you would want a moral judgment. You want a response. What color is your hair? Oh, cool. And you also do this as a job? Cool. Those things have the equivalent level of weight. And that is something she was never used to. So it was so much fun playing that and playing things off of her in that way and getting Owynn to a position where he could understand her and communicate with her as an equal, because she is not an equal to who she is in her mind, at least in my opinion. She seems like she's somehow, like I said earlier, not a people in certain ways.
Right.
And Owynn sees that and goes, okay, well, you're not a people. And it's fine for her to think it all day long, but when Owynn says it, she takes exception to it.
How dare you?
How dare you allow factual statements of me as if they were insults?
Right, before we started. How dare you tell me the truth to my face?
Exactly. The audacity. You know, but it was a lot of fun, especially considering his entire build was meant to complement hers.
I was gonna my next question was gonna ask, where did you come up with the idea for Owynn?
So the idea of Owynn was twofold. If I was an assassin whose job was to potentially kill other assassins, how would I do it?
Right.
And in that vein, mechanically, we needed an arcane caster.
Right.
How do I get a caster who can do melee combat? And for me, I wanted to avoid any class that anybody else had already played on stream.
Right.
Which is why I didn't play a wizard.
Mm.
So I went, okay, I'll play sorcerer. Bard, too easy, too obvious.
But bards are so much fun.
Bards are fun, but I'm very verbose and I make very good points, especially when I want to get my way.
Right.
And bards give me a mechanic that allows me to buff myself into the stratosphere so that I always get my way.
Very true. Trust me, as someone playing a character in another campaign with a minimum 18 persuasion.
Yeah.
Minimum.
That skyrockets really fast out of the gate, too.
Yeah.
So I decided to go with a very niche build. How can I maximize a cantrip and sneak attack? How can I have sorcerer utility? And how can I leverage my knowledge of the mechanics in a way that will allow me to do a little bit of everything whenever somebody else can't? So the Mastermind Rogue, the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer, made perfect sense.
Yeah.
It gives me a bigger spell list than any other sorcerer, access to a good chunk of the wizard spell list, gives me meta magic, which is a combat specialist, super powerful. Rogue obviously gives me sneak attack, my cunning actions, but the ability to perfectly mimic a voice, as well as access to magic that would eventually allow me to disguise myself long term, means I could be anybody I wanted to be. Which means if I needed to replace somebody, I could.
Yeah.
If Hector wasn't going to cooperate, if V wasn't going to cooperate, if Torn wasn't going to cooperate, all it takes is a disguise self spell and my ability to extract information and have a perfect mimicry of somebody's speaking cadence. And they're no longer necessary. I can play their role for them.
Which during the campaign puts you at odds with Hector as well. Which was very interesting to see, because knowing Tim and knowing kind of his idea for Hector and how a lot of us, myself included, all had our ideas for Hector. Like we all looked at Hector. There's a famous picture, and it's of a 6 on the ground. That's one person on this side
6 and
saying
9.
it's a 6, the other saying it's a 9. Except we all did that with Hector from different directions.
And Owynn came in and said, "No, it's a 6."
Yeah.
Bye. Like, you guys can argue all you want.
But it almost boiled down to people, and especially Owynn, which made it all the more interesting, almost forcing what they thought the right answer was, especially Owynn, especially during the council meeting.
Okay.
Which I would love to have seen Tim's point of view on.
He knew it was a risk. That's why Hector was there to begin with. He knew that it was a risk. He knew immediately, and he telegraphed it to me that he knew by showing the sword. So I knew it was Hector the whole time.
We were talking about Hector and Owynn butting heads at the Council of Brine meeting.
So remember when I said that one of the aspects of Owynn, that is me, that shines through, was the utilitarianism.
Yes.
That scene with Hector is the other most, it's arguable, but I would, for me personally, I would think that it is the most true to myself part of Owynn. Some people could argue with evidence that the way that Owynn died was.
And we'll get into that 100%, because I don't think we've talked about that since.
We have not.
So more to come. Continue.
Owynn, here's the thing. I never went into his backstory, and I'm not going to go into it here.
You tease.
If you want to do a full Owynn expose, we can. If you want the Cliff Notes version, he was somebody conscripted who watched too many farmers' sons and daughters die on a front line for people who would never know their names or their faces and would never care that their corpses were cooling in a battlefield somewhere. Hector is the perfect representation of someone who has the power to make the world a better place and refuses to do so. Owynn, as a utilitarian, sees Hector as someone with the power to make the world a better place. And thus, he doesn't care how much it hurts Hector or upsets Hector or makes Hector feel like he's being hypocritical or makes him sad because he doesn't want to do it. Suck it up, save the world, because you can. Those who can must. It is not those who can should. Those who can are obliged to. It is a degree beyond Uncle Ben and Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. With the ability to affect change and the power to save lives and make the world a better place than it was yesterday, you have the absolute sword of Damocles above your head. You must do that. And if it costs you everything, too bad. Because if you don't, it will cost so many more. Everything, every day, every hour, every person who dies because they could not eat, because they were not safe, because they could not find shelter, and you have the power to provide those things, is a death on your hands. And if you want to sit there and be a sad boy about all the failures of your life and all of the people who died because you made a choice, you can learn from your past or you can be swallowed by it, because you will never outrun it, and you will never, no matter how many thousands of years you live in your right mind or not, be able to do anything that will outweigh your sins if you do not take the power that you actually have and exercise it to make the world a better place. Owynn's entire goal was to bait Hector into commanding him to not kill V. Because it had nothing to do with V.
Right.
It was because then he was forced to command someone over whom he had absolute authority to do something that they didn't want.
Right.
And that was all Owynn wanted out of him. If you'll do it to me, then you can do it to other people. And if that saves lives, if that makes the world a better place, if that brings Brian back, makes it safe, stops this threat, ends this horrible cult, then me being the first in line for a bunch of dominoes that need to get knocked down, at worst, is an honor. Because if you are willing to do it once, that's all that it takes.
Right.
There's a old anime. For those of you who grew up on Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer, many centuries ago in the 90s, in the late 1900s,
You gotta do me like that, man.
there was an anime. I can hear my spine. Shut up. There was an anime called Trigun. And in that, there is a pivotal scene where someone who is a pacifist is forced. Spoilers for an anime that's almost 35 years old.
Mm-hmm.
A man who is a pacifist is forced to kill someone in order to save innocent people who he genuinely loves. And in that moment, you can break a character and they can become a villain, or they can mature and become a real hero. When I say real hero, I'll cite the Superman conundrum. Who is a better hero, Spider-Man or Superman?
See, now I feel like the question was loaded before you asked me.
Who can save more lives?
Who can save more lives? Superman.
Yeah. Who in general does save more lives?
Still Superman?
Yes. Who is a more perfect representation of what a person morally should be?
Spider-Man.
Nope. It's Superman.
So
He's better than you, and you know it. And he doesn't blame you for that. Nowhere in the majority of Superman, of like especially core good old boy Superman,
like 85% not
85
taking any kind of Elseworld story.
Yeah, he is. I mean, we're going to get away from truth, justice, and the American way narrative, but he's a good person. And he does good things. He does good.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wants us to be good, to be better, to do good. Who risks more, Superman or Spider-Man?
Spider-Man.
Who suffers more, Superman or Spider-Man?
I would say Spider-Man.
Who, if they quit, would you say that's fair? Superman or Spider-Man?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man is a better hero because he actually risks something when he is out there doing his job. He suffers to save people. That is a hero. If you want to make Hector a hero, he has to willingly suffer. He can't die of natural causes. He's an Oath of Ancients paladin. He's above level 13. He cannot die of natural causes. Poisons and diseases do not affect him. He cannot age. He could live for 100,000 years. And he knows that. He's Superman.
Right.
He's not risking anything. Owynn's entire goal, my goal, when I realized what Owynn's conflict with Hector was to make him make that choice. Because it didn't matter what he chose. Owynn was genuinely willing to die on that sword. Because he knew somebody would try to assassinate Hector. The truth would come out eventually. He would be on the chopping block, his head off with his head, whatever. He accepted that before he walked into that. It was Hector's choice not to let Owynn jump on that sword. Hector chose to take away Owen's free will in sacrificing himself for the greater good and put himself in that position. Now he is obliged to fulfill that because he's already killed one. He's already broken that creed of not interacting, not participating, not affecting the world. He had a moment where him and V could run off, and she could murder Hobo until she was a high enough level where she had timeless body, and they could spend the next 50 years, 60 years together.
Which I think is only like 2 or 3 more levels, by the way.
Yeah, probably. That's only a few hundred bandits, and that is an afternoon at best. And they could be happy together. He could have that. He has that. That is an option. You A or B, you can pick whichever one you want, and you'd be correct and right and justified to do. And he chose B.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately for the DM, the character that I know for a fact was never supposed to be a main character is now the
hero of the story.
The mainest of characters. He's on the cover art. He is the first named character. He gets top billing for the VA. That is who he is. Against every possible attempt to not let that happen. And now he is locked into that.
See, you're not wrong. And I can't wait. I can't wait until Olive's interview, because he went down a completely separate path than we expected when it came to Hector and V interacting with one another, which he is now locked into. And cannot.
That what happens when you give a broken sociopath a sad boy object that becomes a people? It learns to love the object, and then it carries that over to the people. Oh no, what has happened? But anyway, back to the world's most condescending assassin, apparently.
All right, let me regain my focus here. I'm sorry. Let me catch my breath. So, so Joe, as a player and as a character, Owynn had arguably the most interesting moment in the entire campaign thus far. Because as of now, he has the only death of an NPC or of a player character that was a member of the party. As a player, what was that whole situation? Because that was tense. That 30, 45 minutes of trying to think our way out of this. Die. What was that like from your end of the dice rolls? Because I know how a lot of us felt. What was it like for you?
It was frustrating because I knew 5 ways to save the day, but they would have been metagaming. If Taruk turned into a werewolf, jumped in, opened the mouth, I'm out. Baller. He could sit in there for 11 rounds. All right. If Torin came down and smote the teeth, I could get out, no problem. If either of the casters were there, they could have healed me, no problem. If Corrales had used Hypnotic Pattern on the Mimic ship, statistically, would have failed, would have been incapacitated, and get out. But that's all metagaming. That's because I know what a cleric can do and what a paladin can do and what Corrales's kit of insanity can do.
I can't wait for that interview, by the way.
All right. There were other aspects that compounded the frustration, but those are neither here nor there. The most important thing is I knew once it was laid out that it was already in melee range, I already knew I was dead. My primary ability, my spell casting, didn't work. I didn't have the strength to make the checks. So I already knew that mathematically I was dead, and I didn't have any way other than DM fiat or metagaming to save Owynn. So he died.
I do have to say, as much as it would annoy the character to admit, Owynn kind of got what I always expected Torin to get. Because
the heroic
Owynn,
sacrifice.
the heroic sacrifice, 100%. I've always expected Torin either A, to save the day because he's, you know, the good lizard boy who hit good, or the you guys go, you know, I'll hold them off kind of moment. So when Owynn gets the I'm gonna take this ship with me moment, that's kind of what I've always expected to happen to Torin.
And that's something that you should know is an inaccurate assessment. Owynn didn't die protecting you. He didn't make a heroic sacrifice. He took some idiot with him straight to the Nine Hells and hoped he had enough gold to pay the way for everything that ship had killed.
Right.
He killed it out of spite, not
heroism.
Yeah,
100%. 100%. That's what Owynn did. I'm just saying.
But the way that Torin saw it, because Torin sees the world through rose-tinted glasses. He doesn't mean ill by what he does. So any ill that occurs isn't his fault. Whereas Owynn looks at everything through a broken shard of mirror, through a dirty pane of glass. Everything is a threat, and everything is his fault. Because if he had been stronger or faster or smarter or more capable, then it wouldn't be a problem, would it?
Right.
And that's where those two meshed so well, is because they were two different, they're very much the same person going two different routes after one bad day.
Yeah. I would have to agree with that.
The next best class for Owynn was always Paladin.
Well, say Owynn survived and Owynn ended up multi-classing.
I mean, he was already multi-classed, but if he could trade it,
if he ended up, going down the path of Paladin, what oath would he pick?
Well, I would absolutely take the People's Oath, but that's UA or homebrew. So for the established oaths, Owynn would definitely take the Oath of Ancients, following Hector's footsteps, because that's the only one that guarantees him a long enough life to make the world a better place forever. He would swear to anything that would grant him functional immortality,
right,
and the power to make the world a better place. And he would not care the cost. Owynn would be a wonderful warlock too.
Sadly.
But realistically, the class for the character as he became was absolutely Paladin. Because Paladin's strength comes from their oath. And the oath to make the world a better place at any cost, that's devotion or conquest.
Right.
But Owynn willing to bend any rule and make any sacrifice, ancients would give him, he would live until something killed him. And if something killed him, he probably deserved it. But if he could make the world a better place,
or he'd take it with him.
Or he'd take it with him. I mean, that's going to happen either way. But
you may win, but at what cost?
Not without some sacrifices.
So all this being said, because it is 100% inevitable that we're gonna have you back on the show, at least for this campaign. We've already, you, me, and Tim have all talked offline about the future of campaign 2. And then when and where that'll happen, not
We'll see.
100% sure, but it will happen one day. What is a class that you think you would enjoy playing in this campaign, and what is a class that you may or may not end up picking for this campaign?
I would definitely enjoy being either a wizard or honestly, a wizard or an arcana cleric wizard multi-class. Would be what I would love to play.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have very little in the way of arcane utility spells. You have Corrallus. He's all of your arcane.
Yep.
But there's already been a wizard in the campaign, and I genuinely try to avoid playing classes that other people are currently playing or have played, because I don't ever want someone to feel like I'm replacing them, or that I'm targeting them, or that I am trying to show them up in any way.
Right.
But considering what my options are, gonna have to. So realistically, best.
I think the only 2 options, if you stuck solely to that logic, I think your only 2 options are Artificer and Bard.
The only option would be the only options are Artificer or Bard.
Yeah.
Or pure rogue. But why be pure when you can be better?
Yeah. There's the mid-maxer I know and love.
But realistically, what I should do is play a Divine Soul Sorcerer, Celestial Pact Warlock, or a Cleric, so I can heal and offer utility.
Yeah.
And because I don't want to be disruptive, I will have to skip some of the more powerful options for Cleric, or some of the more interesting builds for, like, especially a Warlock. I don't want to play a Warlock because Corrallus.
Right.
I don't. Playing a Cleric is probably fine, because there are so many flavors of Cleric. You can run a 7-person party of all Clerics, and they're all going to be different.
Call them the Amen.
Yes, sir. But at the same time, a healer is required.
Yeah.
Only because you guys, as a party, don't have the tactical synergy to not need healing.
Right.
That's just what it is. And that's not a value judgment. That's just, oh, no, we need heals. Got you. That's sometimes you just need a res. That's just what it is. So I'll probably be, if I play, I'll probably be a healer of some kind. Now I could be a straight rogue healer and just do a stitch build. Ooh. And run healing kits, and use expertise in nature to make potions, and just give everybody healing potions and stitch them up real good whenever they get cut deep, because when they cut deep, you got to clean it out and stitch them up. But that's what I'll probably end up doing. So Cleric is probably the obvious choice, especially because Cleric can be built to be very utility or very damage oriented without sacrificing their major healing abilities. Raise Dead, Revivify, Cure Wounds, Healing Word. Those are 4 spells out of all the spells you know. Like, you're good. Those are them. Those are the healing ones.
Those are the ones.
And if you need lesser or greater restoration, chances are you can wait till tomorrow. It's fine.
Trying to think if I had any final questions before we wrap this up, or any final comments. outside of do you think your next character will be as disruptive as Owynn?
Not intentionally.
Not there it is. Intentionally. Let me put that out there.
Owynn was never designed to be disruptive, but he was inevitably going to be.
Right.
There was no way for a character who shows up out of the blue and is just offering to help to not be disruptive.
Right.
Because either everybody goes, okay, this is great, and now they're just following him, or they're fighting it.
I saw that look.
There's no, they're like, those are the options, right? Like those are the options.
Yeah.
Either way, he's disruptive. His presence is disruptive. And then with the whole relationship with Hector, and then understanding and learning the situation in Brine and realizing that Hector was a viable option, it was going to come to a head one way or another. So Owynn did it on his terms as best he could. If there's a skeleton in your closet you do not want to face, and facing it will net us results, I'm kicking the door down to your closet.
Right.
Because I need results. That's Owen's mentality, right? I feel like the way he started to be played and the way he grew was very different than how I originally intended the character. But I feel that the character at his core was fundamentally self-consistent.
I think so.
And that's the best I can hope for, is that a character, as a character, makes sense. And just being able to back the DM into a corner and forcing his tack on NPC to be the main character against his will and against the character's will
was just icing on the cake.
Oh yes, it was the good icing too. It wasn't the cheap sugar icing on it.
It was that nice.
It was that good buttercream with the mascarpone.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joe, I appreciate you sitting down with me, talking to Owynn, talking D&D, the finer mechanics of playing the shady rogue sorcerer assassin. But I mean,
if you ever want to go into the finer mechanics of weird ideas, let me know.
Oh, definitely. I know who my tech support is when it comes to, hey, I have this idea for D&D. How do I make it work? But thank you for joining me. Thank you for sitting down and talking. Can't wait to see you back on the show because it's inevitable. I just don't know when, because I may run the show, but I am not the DM, so I don't know when Tim's going to bring you back.
Know your role.
But I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to have you back. And thank you for sitting down and talking.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate you and everything you do.
Thank you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate it. More interviews to come. I think the next two coming up are going to be Olive, aka Lady V, and George, aka Corrales, which honestly, those two interviews are going to be my the ones I'm looking forward to the most, because man, how many times can one person sell a soul? And the morphing of Lady V from not a people to kind of a people, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a blast. But thank you guys for joining us. As always, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, tap the little bell on your YouTube app so you never miss an upload, and buy the shirts at prowrestlingtees.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.